Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jasched. Today I'm excited to have with me my friend Ebony Dignan, who is the Director of EJD Advisory, providing strategic on-demand counsel, risk management, and governance support that empowers and upskills internal teams for management to prioritize and focus on strategy and growth and embed strong compliance and practical risk management frameworks. Ebony was also named Modern Counsel 35 Under 35, Women in Defense finalist for legal in 2023, and Defense Lawyer of the Year finalist in 2023. So thank you for this opportunity to, I don't know, glaze you up a little bit and just shout it from the rooftops everything you've already done and recognized for. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Jess.
So fun. It's one of my favorite things about having guests on the podcast is getting to just have them sit there and take it, like have and just get to like just read some of their accolades and some of the things that they've achieved or experienced. It's just a really nice feeling to do. So yes, that's just an aside, but it's really fun. But I know that some people are going to hear things like governance, risk management, counsel, and and maybe it's one of those areas that might sound a little dry, but I also know that a lot of the conversations we have had, it can be quite interesting, especially when it comes to leadership and how we show up in work and how we create environments and cultures that, in this case, are becoming more and more related to psychological safety and psychological hazards. So we know now every state across Australia has regulations that govern the management of psychological hazards. In 2023, Queensland brought in a code of practice that recognises psych safety in the same way as physical safety. On the 1st of December in 2025, Victoria brought in that legislation that is, I think, the strictest standards of psychological safety or hazards legislation that we have seen. And we're not going to unpack all of that today, but what we are going to do is just discuss how that impacts actual behaviors in the workplace and leadership and moving from just box ticking exercises to actually practicing it. Um, Maybe because the legislation tells us to, or because we recognize that it is important to do regardless of legislation. That's my personal professional belief. But yeah, how do you, so it's a broad first question, but how do you see that difference in leadership's responsibility on setting these standards?
I think leadership, there's an inherent amount of trust in leadership. And to ensure that you are looking after that trust of the team around you, of the business and its success, you really need to be open to self-reflection and self-reflection on where the risks are within your business. And for the point of this conversation, the psychological risks and safety hazards that may present across the business, and engage with your staff. First point is always yourself, where you see risks are, but secondly, it should be engaging with personnel with outside of yourself within the business that will give you further insights that might be in your blind spots to make sure that everyone is feeling safe and secure in the environment in which they work.
So I know if anyone has listened to me speak professionally before or listened to the podcast, I always come back to this topic, but it just shows up. So you're saying it's all about how we communicate?
Yes.
Oh, imagine that.
Yes. Well, everyone's individual. They see different things. They
hmm
feel different things. They are a unique individual. And I think part of psychosocial safety is recognizing the individual people within your team and what they need to feel
Yeah.
safe, and where they see risk in the business, because stress for you or I could be very different things. And you can attempt to standardize that by seeing hazards, putting controls in place, putting in standardized frameworks for behaviors and expectations. But fundamentally, that there needs to be input as to how that is implemented across the business for the individual.
And that makes so much sense to me and to you. Like that makes that makes so much sense in the perspective of it is important to ask people what they need to be like I always if I'm working with different directors and guiding them on this, it's always like start if you can, where you can, start with, the recruitment process, the interview process. What is it that you need to be successful and to feel successful in this role? And that comes down to those needs as well. What makes you feel safe and secure? And I want to get to the whole conversation about like challenging conversations doesn't mean lack of safety. It's just, sometimes it's just needed. But it's also, it's like offering perks that aren't relevant to staff. It's like offering, oh, you get free childcare. That's one of the key perks for all staff. And there's people who don't have kids who are like, cool, not going to use this. Like, what about me? Like, what else can I get in lieu of that and just not having that variation? So I think it's one of those, many of those really conversations that we need to be proactively having, where it's check-ins and where it's maybe standardizing processes to like in timelines to have those conversations. Like you can standardize things around it, but really asking the question, what is important to you? And then, yes, going back and assessing, is this in relation to psychological safety, or is this just like we want this, like really, discerning and assessing, but having those conversations and making it a secure place to receive the answers.
Yes. And I think that that changes as you trickle down into the organization, depending on how many layers of hierarchy you have, how big
Mm,
the team is. But if we sat there and spoke about that with a business that had one director, one senior manager, and five direct reports, that process of engaging with them to work out, well, what's the standard of conduct that we expect here? Like, what's our baseline? And then what do we as a collective team want that may be above and beyond that baseline that's expected by the law, by society as common practice, like really choose your
mm,
adventure. But where do we sit on that spectrum there as to what we want to see in our work environment? That would be a very different conversation to where you were working with a team of maybe 100 staff, where you have your direct reports are maybe 10, but then their direct reports are 20, 30 staff.
mm,
Um, that then there's an element of training. So you might set the tone at the top, but how is that filtering down? How are you getting that buy-in from all levels of the organization and have it flow up? Because I think if consistency is key, you may be having the conversation up here around what I, as director, as CEO of the organization, feel is best for our organization. And
mm.
this is what I want you to trickle down. Go forth and see what you get, as in you buy in from your teams below you, and then we can adjust and adapt accordingly. But it does need to be inclusive, and it does need to consult with all levels of the staff. But this is what we're saying, and training that through the organization.
It's very similar to um, my approach with leadership training and well-being in an organization as well. And well-being, like it is one of those things that I'm not a HR professional or a legal professional, so it's adjacent to this psychological safety and it helps support it, but I'm not the one advising on that. But the leadership training, my approach to that is it starts from the top. It has to be normalized culturally from the top, but exactly as you're saying, it also has to have a mechanism to not just trickle down where there gets less and less and less the more it trickles, but like it has to have a mechanism to flow through the ranks, the so-called ranks or the hierarchy or any sort of chain of authority there, where it is just as strong towards the other end as it is at that director level, that executive level, and it needs to both be led from that place so that the model is set, like the example is set, the model can be followed. But also, I think it makes me think of how leaders need to be aware of how their, let's say, middle managers are behaving towards their staff too, because there is that ongoing responsibility. And I know from what I hear about some, like larger organizations, that is usually where the challenge is. Like people are struggling with that because they don't have access to the higher ups to just sort of go, this is how I'm experiencing work, this is how I'm being treated. It's all of these things.
And I think it's the middle management that have the responsibility in that instance to personalize what that standard
Hmm.
baseline position is. It's in the tone of how they deliver the messages. It's in the key words that their staff respond to and understand as the language that suits the work that they're doing, the personality types that are in the team, the trust that sits within the team or the relationships that sit there. Um, in a large organization, um, the person at the top may not necessarily have the insights that the middle management have to allow that to happen, which is where there is safety, typically there is trust. And to
Mm.
have trust, there has to be that one-to-one knowledge of the individuals, in my personal opinion.
No, I agree. I think that's why it does work both ways. Like, because leadership have the authority, yes, and they can set the standard, and middle management, like whatever you want to call it, but middle management are the ones that are on the front lines, like they are more aware of the more personal issues, but just because by nature of their roles, and leadership higher than that needs to take that under advisement. I think this is
Mhm.
also how they step out of just ticking boxes.
Absolutely. That being said, I will say that there also needs to be an avenue available for staff to go around middle management where they, as you rightly point out, don't meet those same standards.
Yeah.
And sometimes businesses can fall down in that as well. They
Mm,
don't do the surveys, they don't do the direct engagement. Management or the senior management are not available for open door policies just to have someone pop in and say, how are you going?
yeah.
Um, and so I think there does need to be a fail safe mechanism um,
Hmm.
to support that too, because otherwise, if you are just following the direct line of authority, things can get kept at a lower level. Particularly when you're looking at things like bullying, job demands, and stress levels. If the team members are sitting there saying, I'm stressed," management's sitting
Hmm.
there saying, "Crack on, do more, keep going, you'll be fine." How do they get around that? How do they get the support?
Yeah.
There needs
Yeah.
to be that secondary fail safe.
I agree. Like, and I think the more rigid the hierarchy is in an organization, the harder that becomes. Like, we both in different ways, but I partake in a lot of research into defense, like, or, or adjacent, and that hierarchy is so um, set in stone, which serves a purpose in a military level, sure, but when it comes to there's no HR department, so when it comes to navigating through challenges, there is a bit of a block of, well, you don't go beyond your chain of command, like you don't jump that. And then you see that in organizations too, where the larger they are, the more I think I told this story a few episodes ago, but like even in relative, not even large organizations, but relatively medium organizations, I remember being um, questioned about why I said good morning to the CEO and asked how his weekend was. And suggested that that was unprofessional. And it was like open plan office. It wasn't like there wasn't any weird about it, but it was like, oh, that's weird that you spoke to them like a human, like so it's like, oh, I'm not even it's I respect structures and processes and legislation, but I struggle with authority personally in that way because I don't understand why we can't just speak to people like they're human. And I think when I see legislation like this come in place and hear you talking about how, yeah, we have to have these ways to go around, it seems weird to me that we even have to put a process in place for that. But I know that some organizations do need that process in place in order to just create that safety along with psychological safety.
I think that's an important point of note is we're catering to a worst case scenario here.
Mm.
And that is an environment that's not checking in with its staff, that doesn't care how they're feeling when they come to work, that's focused on operations without realizing the connection between operations and personnel, um, to drive success and
Hmm.
resilience in the business. Um, because I think I have worked with many organizations where you walk in, people are happy to be there. They say hello. The people, management are walking the floor. They know their staff. They personalize gifts and
Mm.
acknowledgements and accolades because they know what is important to the people. And I look at the adjustment to the psychosocial safety regulations, and I go, that that those businesses where everyone is happy to be there, they've got such alignment with their culture, with their standards of and expectations on behavior in the workplace and how they deploy and perform their roles. That's run of the mill for them.
Mm. Yeah.
They don't like they from a compliance perspective, they may need to document those risks, they may need to document the controls that they've put in place, but in practice, they're doing it in without thought,
Yeah.
as run of the mill. And so I think that too is important to know. Where are you on that scale of
Yeah.
businesses? Where is your team? Because even
Mm.
within an organization, different teams will have different subcultures and they'll have different substandards of behavior. Like, you know, some teams may be very jovial in nature, and that's how they create a safe environment to be able to put forward how they're feeling and what they are concerned about, or what's important to them in any day of the week, whereas others are very rigid and
Mm.
very sensible,
Yes.
very
Never have
dry.
I ever been one of those, like in one of those teams where I'm like, no, no, we collaborate through laughter. I don't know.
I agree. I don't perform well in those environments
No,
either.
I'm like, ugh, get me out of this box. I I think it's such an important point, and I know we're not going into unpacking it, but I want you to fact check me because I'm not positive, but I believe that some of these legislation, like these regulations, they are in relation to businesses of a certain size, of employee size or staff, like workforce size. So
Yes and no.
okay. So
Yeah, so
where I was going with that, and you could please fill in the gaps and correct me, but in relation to smaller businesses who may just have a few team members who may not be under as many of the regulations, if even though still some, they can still start to put these things in place, right? To sort of practice best practice, even if they're not at that size where the requirements really, really do come in a bigger way.
yes and no. So under the workplace health and safety regulations, directors and anyone in control of a business, you still have responsibilities. You have a duty of care to your personnel.
Yes.
And so I would push back slightly on that and just say I think irrespective of size of the business, you this should be something that you're turning your mind to. It should be something that you're aware of. It should be something that you check in with your team on intermittently, and you should be having both a conversation about, but you should also have the documentation to support. Just because something is regulated doesn't and is prescribed to fit a business of a certain size doesn't mean that you push that down the road until it becomes applicable to you. It matters,
Yes.
and there are many different triggers that may mean that these things in varying levels apply to businesses of different sizes. But I think there is also more generally a corporate responsibility, a business owner responsibility. As I said, um, the safety and the psychosocial safety of the team and just self as a business owner, I think is also the other part of that. Um, is critical to ensure resilience, business resilience, with trust in your relationships with your staff and staff retention. Um,
Mm.
and then with your customers, so that that will flow through to how your staff engage with the customers and how the customers engage with you and your suppliers. It also flows through just simply to how you present as an organization, and what you want to be known for in the recruitment process as you're growing, as you're expanding into new markets, if that becomes relevant to you. And then the legal side is the end state. In my, as I said, in my humble opinion, we shouldn't be striving for something just because it's in a law or it's in a regulation. Um, it should be because we want the best for our business. And the best for our business is to build a trusted environment with our customers, our employees, and within all of our relationships, which will then drive success through financial resilience, through knowledge, retention, and innovation as well.
Yeah, that's probably the answer I was looking for, actually. It's exactly that. It's where
Nailed
I
it.
was heading because I'm like, yeah, regardless of what the legislation says, my fundamental belief, both personally and professionally, is
Mm,
that we should be practicing best practice as best we can anyway, like before, even before the legislation kicks in. But as you said, there is still a responsibility. And this is my professional opinion also, and a personal opinion is I think any business should hold their own a standard of responsibility for how they contribute to society anyway. So it's like what that
absolutely.
looks like, that's going to be subjective to some degree, but when it comes to, yeah, how they treat their people, how they hold that space, I think that
Mm.
should be a standard regardless. I think that should be a practice regardless. And you've mentioned a couple of times like the financial positive effect of these things can't be understated. And I talk about this again from the well-being perspective a lot, where, and I think it relates to this, the psychological, psychosocial hazards as well, is I think this is correct. There have been studies where they found that for every dollar of mental
Mm.
health or well-being initiatives brought into invested into the business, I believe, I'm willing to be wrong about this and fact checked, but I believe that businesses on average get a $2.30 return for every dollar spent.
It's impressive.
It's impressive. And like I'm over here being like, yeah, let's talk about well-being, and businesses are in some cases like that is so important. We're not prioritizing that right now. And this is a me thing, but from that perspective of, well, this should be a priority anyway because it's good for you. It's a responsibility we should hold anyway. But um,
If you
there's
have
also
no staff, you have no business.
yeah, there's also like the financial impacts of that. Like, the other element of retention when people are happier. You've said this, but when people are happier, when they feel healthy, when they feel, I want to say secure, not just safe, but when they feel secure in their workplace, it is such an important element of how they feel about showing up. It reduces absenteeism, it reduces staff turnover, it improves productivity, it reduces fatigue levels. Like these are all things that, that there are studies that say all of this. And I think incentive wise, again, I believe that it should be enough based on how we feel. Like how we feel should be enough of a reason. Feeling good, person like as for business directors, for leaders, for their team members, everyone feeling good and flourishing or thriving should be enough of a reason. But if it's not quite enough to get you there to convince you, the financial incentive is also the other one because it also costs a lot to replace staff.
Hmm.
Like I've done the maths before for clients on, all right, well, if you lose this staff member in that role, this is what they're not bringing in for this amount. I was also like picked up a pen as if I was going to start doing it in real time, but no. But like, it's also like, yeah, this is what you lose in what they might be like in productivity. but also this is on average how long it takes to replace that kind of role. And then you have the onboarding time, which is up to 3, sometimes 6 months, depending on the role, but on average 3 months to get someone really up to speed, even if they're already qualified.
Hmm.
So it's like that's, the better part of half a year or more of lost
Hmm.
revenue.
Hmm. Let alone the mistakes that are made in that time period.
Uh-huh.
Be honest, we're all human. Uh, and there will be things that take not only take longer but are done incorrectly whilst you've got going through staff transition and they don't
Yeah.
have the background and the context that
Yeah.
staff who you've retained for quite a period of time would have.
And it's either the double up on the handover period if you're lucky enough to have a handover period with team
Mm.
members, it's the double up on salary, or if you're unfortunate enough to not have a handover period with team members, then it's not the double up on salary, but it's the mistakes. It's that it takes longer to have onboarding because there's less of a training process. And there's all of these layers and it's just expensive.
Hmm.
And I know you in your side of business from that risk management and governance, you come from the same perspective that I come from in my side in the well-being, which is what if we do it proactively?
Yes, absolutely. It's better to do it at the front end than to be dealing with the problems at the back end and still have to come in with the same and align with the same standards anyway.
Exactly, because some problems are still going to happen, and that's because that's just life. Like literally, some
Mhm.
problems are still going to happen, but you can reduce the amount of reactive problems you have to react to, or
Mhm.
best case, respond to, if you're lucky, and you can reduce that just by being proactive.
Absolutely. And I think the other point with proactivity is it's not set and forget. I'm proactive today and I've gotten on the front foot and I've set this into place and we've implemented and huzzah, away we go.
Woohoo! Yeah.
Yeah. No, no, no. Proactive in engagement and alignment on particularly these type of issues is an ongoing checkpoint that you need to factor
Mm,
in and consider throughout business, whether it's through business growth, whether it's through new staff, whether it's just business as usual. You still
mhm.
need to check in and have a look at, is this still working? Is this still accurate? Is this still where we want to be playing? And at the level that we want to be playing in? Have we
Mm.
got feedback that says something to the contrary isn't working? What does that look like?
Exactly. And I think, especially at time of recording, it is the end of 2025. Like, if you're watching it, you can see my Christmas decorations. I'm not late. It's still December when we're recording, but this is coming out in January. And I think this is a perfect time for this conversation for business owners, for leaders, for directors, and you mentioned it before we started recording. You might have mentioned it since as well, but everyone has a role. So it's not just the leaders, but it's also like everyone, right? Everyone contributes to the culture. It's such a good time, not just an important time, it's such a good time to be thinking about this and to be having conversations about this, to be workshopping this because we're at the start of a new year. Everyone hopefully feels a little bit more refreshed, but even if you don't, we still have that energy of the year ahead and planning and what do we want to do for the year ahead? Let's go. Woohoo. Like
Set the standards.
some version of that. Yeah, and it's a great time to start to set the standard even if you can't do all of it in one fell swoop. I understand that desire. I understand that need, that urge to want to have it all done. But what that does sometimes is limits us from actually starting. So it's like, even if you start having the conversations, start scheduling those check-ins and asking your team, and you might refine the questions as you go, or you might get advice from, I don't know, someone like Ebony to, to refine what those questions are and to but start to just have the conversations, schedule in those conversations and go, all right, this is what we want to do. This is going to be a process. We'll be figuring out along the way, but we're starting with this. What do you need? And just get the information started.
It starts with them first. Take the time over the Christmas break to
Hmm.
reflect and then engage in the new year.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. Sometimes I think like I know I am I have a particular kind of personality that I like to be prepared. And so much of life you can't prepare for, which has been one of my greatest lessons. Uh,
And two.
yeah. So many people are like can relate to that. We can't control everything, and I'm not trying to control, but I like to be prepared so then I can, like take advantage of an opportunity or feel like it, like you said, if this is almost business as usual, it's just a few tweaks or just a few additional things that come into that. So I understand that this is very much my lens of, well, why wouldn't we just be prepared? And some businesses already feel overwhelmed with business as usual, potentially anyway. So don't give away all the advice because if they want advisory, I recommend you reach out to Ebony. But what is like generally, generically, because it is legal related, so you can't necessarily advise anyway. But what generically can people start with if they are in businesses that just feel already too many plates spinning or too much on their plate? They're like, how do we fit this in anyway?
So I feel like now is a great time to say this is not legal advice. It is just a conversation
Yes.
and some recommendations. Um, but I think now I've just had a mental blank and lost the question. What was the question?
The question was not legal advice, also for
Not
everyone still
legal advice.
listening, not
Yes.
legal
Not
advice,
legal
but
advice. Oh,
generically, generally
yes.
speaking, if businesses or people within businesses are already feeling overwhelmed, they're like, oh, it's just another thing to do. What do I do? Where do I start? This is too much. All the plates spinning, all of that. Generically, generally, unlegal advice,
Legal advice.
not legal advice, what's something they could start with?
So, from my perspective, I think it's an assessment of, well, what tasks are you actually doing? What priorities do you have? How do those priorities link to the direction that we want to go on as a business this year? Um, is that still within the scope of the role of the individual that's
Mm.
doing the task? Um, what support frameworks do we have in place? Like I mean, both you and I work in jobs where when we're on, and there is a lot on our plate, and it is that constant assessment of, okay, well, for this period of time, I've got a lot of balls in the air. Where do those priorities sit? What things do I have in place around me to support me through that? Um, what are the standards of behavior that I expect to see? Like, am I looking at my own self and going, is that where I need to be? Am I still aligning with the standards of behavior that I want to portray
Mm.
to others? And then, is this for a short period of time? Is it a long period of time? And where am I getting my rest and relaxation in the middle of those things? Um,
I love
so
that one.
I said earlier, and so I think that it's an ongoing communication loop and it's an ongoing assessment loop, particularly in this instance when it's a small team and you're often wearing multiple hats and you're doing multiple roles. Uh, is the best person for the job doing the role? Um, and what else, what other options do you have on the table? Is everyone in the team at the same level of
Mm.
capacity? Is there someone that's carrying more load and why? Is it personal? Is it work related? Um, what what options do you have available to you? But as we sort of started on before, I don't think it's set and forget. I think
Mm.
work inherently, you do have peaks of high stress and then troughs of no stress, low stress, depending on your industry, depending on your role. But making sure you're checking in and supporting each other. And I think we're looping back to another point. Everybody has a role in that. Leadership sets the tone from the most senior executive in the organization through senior managers, through management levels, um, and then the staff themselves. Are you keeping an eye out for one another?
Mm.
Do you have team meetings? Do you have one-on-one meetings? Do you have a code of conduct that says, notwithstanding anything else that's going on in the business, this is what we value and this is how we behave towards each other? Are you holding people accountable?
Mm.
Um, I think if you're doing all of those things and you're constantly alive to those issues and you're constantly alive to ways that you can improve, you're setting a framework there that then allows you to get um, through those tougher periods. And then maybe it is time to, at the end of a particularly tough period, to take a step back and do some team bonding, whether that is
Yeah.
go and have a coffee offsite,
Hmm.
um, or whether it is, well, Friday afternoon, we're going to head out an hour early because we've had
Yeah.
a really long, rough week. Um,
Mm.
or it is just a team meeting where you acknowledge hard work. I think it doesn't necessarily have to cost money, but it does involve communication and acknowledgement of the fact that things are in a particularly fast-paced time. They will get better. We do recognize it. We see that everyone's working hard. We appreciate that everyone's working hard. Um, we've got things in place. How can we support you if you need it?
Yeah.
But we do need to get this thing done to allow us to move to the next level, to keep delivering to our customers and clients. Um, we are still in alignment with our company values, so I think it's very important whilst we're doing it. But I think people can have fast-paced environments or high-demand jobs and still feel safe and secure. It's
Mm.
about feeling heard and being seen and having both of those things checkpointed along the way. Um, and from a more of a compliance perspective, it is making sure you've got a risk assessment. Where are we seeing these problems that could potentially arise in the organization? What controls do we have in place? What escalation pathways do we have in place? How are we training our people to communicate to them that this is what we're expecting them to do? And then when are we going to review whether this is working or not?
Mhm.
And when are we going to check in and see if there is areas for improvement on that or potentially pivoting because that's not really aligning with where the business is going at the moment? It was when we set it in place, but it's not now. Or this change has happened and that alters the landscape. Now we need to factor that in. Um, I think that is my very practical answer.
I love that. And I'm about to give an analogy and I just find it hilarious that I constantly give analogies that of things that we can all relate to, but I've never experienced. So the analogy of like it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it's also like a marathon, which I've never run. I don't run. It's a marathon where I do know though that there are checkpoints along the way. There are hydration points, but there's also check-ins that I know marathon runners have some kind of system in place where they're like, what do I need now? I need electrolytes. Okay, what do I need now? I like, they are checking in along the way and they are learning along the way through their training, but also through the event itself of what do I need to give myself now in order to keep going rather than pre-setting check. Like we can have an idea, but rather than pre-setting checkpoints, we're not actually checking in along the way. Oh, I have like, it's these check-ins along the way. It's setting up whatever processes you can to the best of your knowledge, but allowing the check-ins to adjust them as needed. To you
And documenting,
and documenting, says the legal count, like documenting, like of course, yes, documenting, because then it makes it replicable and it makes it easier for someone else to pick up
Mhm.
and run with.
Hmm.
So,
And and people
yeah.
interpret things in different ways. So if you're
Hmm.
talking to some, you're writing it down for others, it allows or it ensures that you're communicating to a vast range of or through a vast range of modes to ensure that you're making the message clear to the
Yep.
vast majority of people. You can
Yep.
even draw a diagram really if you want to. I love a good house. These are our pillars that will get us to that end state.
Yep. Yep. Same. Supportive pillars, like
Yes.
weight bearing beams. Where are they? What are they?
Yes.
Exactly. And again, that's another analogy I give. I'm like, I don't do construction. I never built a house. But we can all understand the concept of that. Um, oh, that's so good. I think that's a good place for maybe you to let people know where they can reach out to you, where they can connect with you. If they do want to hire your services or if they want to see what you're about, where is that? I'll include the links or any links in the show notes, but if there's a website or something or LinkedIn, where is that?
Absolutely. So I do have a LinkedIn, and I will forward that over to you so that you can circulate that afterwards. And I also have a website, www.ejdadvisory.com.au, very original.
Easy.
Otherwise, yes, otherwise, my email is ebony.dignan@ejdadvisory.com.au.
Amazing. Thank you so much for just talking through this with me and with us. I think like it can be such an overwhelming thing or just another thing. And I think there's so much nuance to it that in both of our areas and in both of our professions, we both care about in the sense of making this no longer just a box ticking exercise, but as you've said, like a real focal point for how businesses run and responsibly, but how leaders and how each person shows up responsibly and how we all have that role. So I appreciate your time and your energy and your wisdom with us always, but thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.